automobile industry was everything back when I was a kid here.
I
And
can
you know, the
imagine.
story I wanted to share about Ariels Anderson was
Yeah.
his last name, right? He was a grandson of Ariels. And back in the day when I was young, right, in the 1970s, 60s, and before even, right, there was a private club
Yeah.
here in Lansing called the Lansing City Club, right? And so this is where the, you know, the well-connected would go to, you know, eat lunch, and they would have their lobbyists come in. And so I was working there as a waiter. And my job was to, there was this big round table where the same guys would come every single day, and my job was to make sure they all had what they wanted, right? Their coffee. And back then, you'd even make them cocktails at lunch, right? That was back in the, remember the 2 cocktail lunch? Have you ever heard about that? These people literally would drink a martini at lunch. I've never had a martini in my life, but I knew how to make one, right? So anyway, Ariels Anderson was one of my customers, right? And people told me, oh, he's, you know, he's grandson of Ariels, you know, oh, okay. Super nice guy, right? And he would take an interest in everybody, right? And in asking me about what I was doing. And, you know, I was sort of like between, I had dropped out of college and I was kind of in between things. And I told him, I said, well, I dropped out of Kalamazoo College. And he goes, well, what'd you do that for? He said, that's such a great college. You should get yourself back there. And I said, well, you know what, come to think of it, I don't really have a good reason why I dropped out. And so he says, you know what, you got to get yourself back in there. And so sure enough, I wrote a letter to Kalamazoo College, and they accepted me back. And, you know, that changed my life, right? It changed my life. That's where I went back to college. I got my degree in Spanish, you know, did the foreign study program from Kalamazoo College. And it was that very summer after I went back to Kalamazoo College, I saw Ariels Anderson walking around campus at Kalamazoo College. And it turns out his daughter was a student there with me at Kalamazoo. And, just another thing about Kalamazoo College, that, you see the story out here about how Ariels donated the engineering building at MSU, which is the main reason MSU survived, because the building had burned down. This was 1907. They also donated the science building at Kalamazoo College. So there's an Ariels science building there. And the science department at Kalamazoo College was the only nationally ranked department that we had at Kalamazoo College.
Wow.
So yeah, that was my little story. So he kind of inspired me to go back to college, and you know, was a wonderful person.
And what is your name?
His name was Ariels Anderson. You know, he had the name of his grandfather, who was Ariels, and then Anderson was apparently, you know, I guess that his mom was an Oles who married a guy named Anderson, right? So.
Very cool.
So yeah, he was a wonderful person. I don't know if you know anything about him here, but.
Do you mind introducing yourself? We didn't catch.
Oh
your name.
yeah, I didn't introduce myself. You can go back
edit.
and put it at the beginning, right? Yeah, my name's Alexander Beal, and I was born here in Lansing, 1954. I was born right at Sparrow Hospital. The building's still there that I was born in, and my family actually came here to Lansing because my father was the state archivist for the Michigan Historical Society. And you know, just the mere fact that we even had a state archivist is a tribute to the automobile industry, because the automobile industry basically funded everything in Michigan, right? We were the 5th most prosperous state in the country when I was born. And that was, you know, obviously due to the fact that there were so many, you know, well-paying auto jobs here. You know, and it supported you know, our universities and you know, things like Kalamazoo College and so forth. So I'm very happy that Ariels put his factory here in 1880, was it? So yeah, this is a great museum too.
Yeah. Can you, I'm curious about your journey. So you went to college, it kickstarted so many positive things in your life. Can you reflect a little bit about automotive in Lansing, how that industry evolved and changed and, what it feels like today?
Well, Oldsmobile as a brand was a super popular brand in Michigan. I remember, first car I remember us having was an Oldsmobile. What was that called? It was a 1955 Oldsmobile, and the name escapes me, but Oldsmobile was a super popular brand. The Delta 88s, that was a cool car, man. Everybody wanted to have that car. And so, Oldsmobile growing up was everything to Lansing. And, it made for a really prosperous middle class. We had, back then, I remember they paved every road. They paved every street here in Lansing. They just did it, in one summer. Because, we were just so prosperous back then. We had city parks where there were college students. Every city park in Lansing, you could go there. They had a couple college students that organized activities. They had baseball games. I don't know about other places, but I just don't think that other places had all those benefits. Our school system was so well financed. We had all these, minor sports. I was a wrestler, right? That was a minor sport, right? But if they hadn't had a wrestling team in junior high school and middle school, we called it junior high school back then. I would have never had the opportunity to excel in sports, because I'm a short guy, you can tell, and I wasn't big enough to play football or basketball. But thanks to wrestling, that's how I ended up getting the scholarship to Kalamazoo College, right, where I went to college, and that led to me studying abroad in Spain. I was from a very modest family, right? We were anything but a high-income family, right? But I was able to study abroad, thanks to people, like the Olds family that donated to Kalamazoo College, and therefore I ended up becoming bilingual. To this day I'm quite fluent in Spanish, and so Lansing is a good place to grow up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, one last question. What do you hope for the future generations to come? What is your hope for them?
Well, I don't per se here in Michigan. I really hope that we can become a leader again in making this place an attractive place for people to want to come and work and study and want to stay here after they graduate, right? Ann Arbor's like that. Ann Arbor's rated the, quote, coolest city in America, like the #1 or 2 college town in all of America. Why can't Lansing be like that, right? Why does East Lansing have to be why does it have to be a separate town? Okay, if you combined East Lansing with Lansing and Delta Township, we'd be more like Madison, Wisconsin, or Columbus, Ohio. I mean, you look at Columbus, Ohio, look at everything that they have. They have like 4 major stadiums in Columbus. And is that because Ohio State is right there in Columbus? Is that because, like Lansing, they're a capital city, but they also have the university as part of the city, not separated off. And so I don't know. I would really like to see Lansing become, Lansing and East Lansing become unified, and the city become, a great capital city in America, and not just sort of like an also-ran capital city. That's my opinion.
Well, thank you. That was awesome. You're very spirited in your storytelling, and I appreciate that.